Welcome, you are on the right channel. In the mighty kingdom of Zaza, King Jatto ruled with great power, but his heart was poisoned. He had 3 wives. The first, Queen Maimuna, was respected for her seniority. The third, Queen Talatu, was known for her cunning tongue. But it was the second wife, Queen Arewa, whose beauty could stop time. Smooth dark skin like midnight oil, eyes like moonlight on a still river, Arewa was a living poem. And that made her a target. She uses charms, Maimuna would whisper. She's a snake hiding behind a pretty smile, Talatu added. The king, tired of their complaints, grew cold toward Arewa. He no longer called her to his chambers. Her gifts were taken, her laughter silenced. She became a shadow in the palace that no one wanted to see. But Arewa never cursed them. She waited. One hot afternoon, as the sun scorched the earth, an old woman walked past the palace gate, balancing a load of firewood on her head. Suddenly, she stumbled. The bundle scattered, and she collapsed in the dust. Everyone froze. No one moved. It was forbidden to touch someone covered in strange red dust from the bush. They said it carried curses. But Arewa gasped and ran out barefoot without permission. She lifted the old woman with both hands, dusted her off, and offered her water. The old woman smiled faintly. You have a kind soul, and a storm on your path. But here she brought out a small leather-wrapped container, like Abaniki balm, glowing softly. Mix this with your cream. Say nothing. Do nothing. Just wait. Before Arewa could ask anything, the woman was gone. That night, Arewa obeyed. She rubbed the mixture on her skin. By the next morning, the palace air shifted. King Jatto noticed something different. Her skin glowed. Her scent stirred forgotten memories. He called for her once, then twice. By sunset, he had moved her into his private chambers. He no longer called her that one. He now called her my blessed queen. The other wives fumed with rage, but no words could explain why even the birds seemed to sing only around Arewa. Then something happened. Within a month, Arewa was pregnant. From the first week of her pregnancy, strange things began to happen. Servants who mocked Arewa suddenly fell ill. People who plotted against her started arguing among themselves. Queen Maimuna brought a poisoned meat pie to her room, but before she could hand it over, she bit her own tongue and began screaming. Talatu hired a herbalist to place a charm under Arewa's pillow. That night, the herbalist went mad and began running naked through the streets, shouting, "The child is watching me." Word spread. The unborn child could hear and fight back. One priest declared, "This is no ordinary pregnancy. A spirit of war sleeps in her womb." The palace was quiet but not asleep. Underneath its ancient roofs, a secret meeting was brewing. The other queens, Maimuna and Talatu, had grown desperate. All their plans had failed. Arewa still stood, glowing with favor, and her unborn child had become more feared than the king himself. The moon was a thin, pale curve in the night sky when they slipped out of their chambers. Clad in dark wrappers, their faces veiled, they made their way to the forbidden hall beneath the palace, a place where rituals were once performed but had been locked for years. Waiting inside were 3 elders, their eyes sunken and robes faded with age. These were no ordinary men. They were part of an ancient cult, one that had been outlawed long ago for their dealings with dark forces. Candles, black as coal, were lit and placed in a circle. The queens and the elders sat around a worn-out gourd filled with ashes, feathers, and a single dead bird's heart. The air grew heavy, thick like smoke, though no fire burned. Symbols were drawn on the floor, strange markings not spoken of in the palace. The room pulsed with whispers from the shadows. The lead elder spoke first. "If the child is a spirit of war, we must trap his soul before the next full moon, or he will rise beyond our reach." The queens nodded. They were ready to finish what jealousy had started. The chanting began, low and rhythmic at first. Then rising, words that didn't belong to any human language filled the room. The gourd began to shake. The candles flickered violently. Something was coming, something unseen. But then, suddenly, the elders' eyes widened, their chanting stopped. One by one, their eyes turned blood red. Maimuna gasped as her hand started to tremble. Talita clutched her chest and turned to the other, face twisted with fury. "You want him for yourself, don't you?" Maimuna spat. "You've always wanted Jata. You dare speak to me like that? You who seduced the king first." Talita screamed. The elders tried to calm them, but it was too late. Voices rose. Accusations flew like arrows. "You betrayed me. You're the reason we failed." In a blink, the ritual turned into a brawl. Candles were kicked over. Chairs smashed. One elder hit his head on the stone pillar and passed out. The gourd shattered into pieces. What they didn't know was that the child in Arewa'S womb had already entered the room in spirit. Not physically, not in form, but in power. His presence was like a mirror held up to each heart, reflecting their darkest thoughts. The jealousy, the deceit, the secret dreams of power and lust. It all spilled out, and they turned on one another like wild dogs. By the time the king's guards rushed in, the room looked like a battlefield. Not a single word was spoken by Arewa. She was asleep, her hand resting gently on her belly. But her child had fought and won. Again, Part 6, the Night of Fire and Birth. The sky darkened in a way the kingdom had never seen. Thick clouds rolled in without warning, swallowing the stars. The moon, once silver and pure, now glowed an eerie shade of crimson. Birds flew backward. Dogs howled without rest. The air felt thick, almost metallic, as if the heavens held their breath. That night, Arewa went into labor. She felt it not with pain, but with pressure, as though the earth itself leaned into her, urging the child to come. Thunder cracked above the palace, shaking its very pillars. Lightning forked across the sky in silent flashes. The midwives assigned to her chamber took one look outside, then another at the woman groaning in bed, and fled in terror. They muttered prayers as they ran, their footsteps echoing down the palace halls. Not one dared return. Only Arewa remained. Sweat drenched her skin. She gripped the edge of the bed, her teeth clenched. No oil, no cloth, no soothing voice, just the storm and her will to bring this child into the world. Outside, leaves tore from trees. The royal banners ripped and flew into the night. A lion in the nearby forest roared, then whimpered as if sensing something greater than itself. As Arewa gave her final push, the ground beneath the palace trembled. The air grew still, and then silence. The world paused. In that perfect stillness, a cry pierced the night. Not weak, not unsure, but strong and sharp, like a horn blown in battle. A boy was born. His eyes were wide open, seeing more than most ever would. His fists were clenched as though ready for war. And upon his tiny chest, a strange mark glowed under the flickering lamplight, a perfect shield, etched into his skin like fire drawn into flesh. He did not wail for long. After one cry, he looked around the room, calm, watchful. They named him Dahiru, meaning he who protects. From that moment, everything changed. Dark spirits once summoned in secret turned and fled at the mere whisper of Arewa's name. Whispered curses choked their senders. Spies sent to harm her lost their way and wandered into the forest, never to return. Men who once scorned her now avoided her eyes. Queens who once plotted stayed locked in their chambers, haunted by dreams of burning thrones and falling crowns. In public, Arewa walked without guards. None dared approach her with malice. The baby on her back, even sleeping, was feared more than 1,000 swords. The king called his court to the throne room. The elders gathered, cautious and quiet. He rose, his voice clear and heavy with regret. "I was blind," he said, But now I see. She who I once ignored is the light of this kingdom. The child she bore is not just mine, but our protector. Let all remember Arewa is no longer a wife. She is a queen, the blessed queen. And from that day, none called her by name again, only by the titles she earned with pain and fire. The palace seemed peaceful at last, but darkness does not die easily. It hides, waits, and strikes when least expected. Talatu and Maimuna, once queens of favor, had been reduced to shadows in their own home. Their beauty faded, their influence crumbled, and the people whispered behind their backs, the cursed ones, the jealous hearts. But bitterness still burned in them like dry firewood waiting for a spark. They refused to accept defeat, refused to believe that Arewa, once scorned, once mocked, now walked with the dignity of a goddess and bore the sun whose presence changed the wind. So they made one final plan. No more spells, no more charms. This time it would be swift, silent. Sure, they would poison the king himself. If he died, the kingdom would fall into mourning, and in that confusion they could twist the narrative, take back power, and erase Arewa's rise forever. They visited the royal kitchen in the dead of night, wrapped in black, faces veiled. A single drink, laced with powdered death, odorless, tasteless, untraceable. The goblet was placed back among the royal set, indistinguishable from the rest. By dawn, the feast had begun. The king sat on his throne, Dahiru's nurse nearby with the child in her arms. Arewa sat to the right, clothed in white, her head high, her eyes calm. Drummers beat gently, meat sizzled, palm wine flowed. Then the moment came. A servant brought the king's drink. Talata's hands shook slightly as she accepted it with a smile and offered it to the king herself. Maimuna stood by, eyes wide with false cheer. The goblet touched the king's lips, but before a single drop passed his mouth, Dahiru let out a scream. Not a normal child's cry. It was sharp, piercing, furious. The baby twisted violently in his nurse's arms, eyes glowing with something far beyond infancy. The room froze. The king looked at his son. Then he looked at the cup. His eyes narrowed. "Why does he cry?" he asked aloud. Silence. Everyone turned to Talatu and Maimuna. The king rose slowly, sniffed the drink, swirled it. Then, calmly, he handed it to his chief taster, who trembled but obeyed. Within seconds of sipping it, the man fell convulsing. Gasps filled the hall. Guards rushed in. Talata screamed. Maimuna fainted. The king said nothing. He did not raise his voice. He simply turned to Arewa. She rose, her child in her arms. She said nothing. There was no need. Truth had revealed itself. That very day, Talatu and Maimuna were stripped of their titles and banished from the kingdom forever. Their names erased from the scrolls of royalty. The rooms they once occupied were cleansed with herbs, salt, and prayers. As they were dragged away, heads down in shame, the people gathered in silence, not to mock, but to witness what justice looked like when destiny was defended by a child. Arewa did not gloat. She did not speak a single cruel word. She simply watched them go, her face like stone carved by time. Her child cooed softly in her arms, his small hand resting on her heart. She had not lifted a finger in her defense, but the gods had fought, and her son had shielded her once again. From that day forward, songs were sung in the market squares. Blessed Queen, mother of the child who sees. She who was hated, now crowned by fate. She who bent, but did not break. Arewa became more than a queen. She became a symbol, a lesson that true power doesn't shout to endures. The palace gates, once cold to her presence, now opened before her like petals greeting the morning sun. The king, humbled and changed, leaned on her wisdom and counsel. Her words, once ignored, became commands. And Dahiru, the child born under a blood-red moon, grew stronger by the day, watched by sages, guarded by spirits, and loved by a nation. Thanks for watching. This is the story of Arawa, the queen they tried to bury, not knowing she was a seed. If you believe that destiny cannot be stopped by jealousy, like this video, subscribe for more powerful African stories right here. Until next time, remember, light may be delayed, but it always shines.